As the United States desperately tries to isolate and contain China, something incredible is happening on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. European powerhouses like Germany and France, both of whom are strategic US allies, are doing the exact opposite. They are moving away from the United States and our hawkish politicians who every day march closer and closer to war, and instead are choosing to build a stronger relationship with China. The biggest news story came when French President Macron personally visited Beijing and met with Xi Jinping. Very quickly, the French president dropped a bombshell on the Americans when he said, "Europe cannot blindly follow the United States' lead and should avoid getting dragged into crises that are not our own." This comment, of course, refers to the ongoing battle between the US and China over Taiwan. You want to see how much this angered Americans? Just listen to conservative radio host Mark Levine.
And look what this bastard does to us, the president of France. He goes over to China at the height of tensions, stabs us in the back, says he will not support us. He's provoking the Chinese to act, talks about autonomy. You can stick your autonomy, France, as far as I'm concerned.
Of course, the New York Times followed with an article entitled "French Diplomacy Undercuts US Efforts to Rein China In." But let's be honest here, the last time the French tried to warn Americans against doing something insanely stupid was back in 2003, when the US pressured our allies to support an unjustified invasion of Iraq. The Iraq War was a farce and an absolute disaster for the Middle East, so let's give the French president some grace as he cautiously seeks to avoid another disastrous American war. But Macron's comments didn't stop with China. In fact, he doubled down and also criticized Europe's efforts in Ukraine. Europeans cannot resolve the crisis in Ukraine. How can we credibly say on Taiwan, "Watch out, if you do something wrong, we'll be there"? Let's be honest. How do Europeans have any credibility to resolve issues in Asia when they can't tend to security issues in their own backyard? In this article from Foreign Policy, author Benjamin Haddad, who is a member of the French Parliament, goes on to write, "The European Union should find its own voice in world affairs and not let its worldview and interest be shaped by others, whether in Washington or Beijing." Though US policymakers may not be ready to hear it, the uncomfortable truth is that Macron is saying out loud what many European partners quietly believe. And that belief is that despite pressure from America, France finally needs to take a stand and act in the best interest of Europe. And other nations are now following suit. Just look at what the Germans are doing to counter America's efforts in containing China. The New York Times first broke this story last week with an article entitled, "As the US Tries to Isolate China, German companies move closer." This article shows the truth of the situation. The fallout from sanctions against Russia have absolutely devastated Europe. Europe is now in the middle of an energy crisis that will last many years, and German companies have no other option but to pivot to China. Let's take Volkswagen, which operates more than 40 factories in China. The German auto company announced intentions to invest billions more in local Chinese partnerships and production sites in 2023 as part of Volkswagen's new campaign called In China for China. The China market is simply too important for the survival of the German automobile industry. Volkswagen, along with Mercedes and BMW, sell roughly 1/3 of all vehicles they produce in China, exceeding sales in all of Western Europe. But this German pivot to China goes well beyond the auto industry. BASF, a leading chemical company, operates 30 production facilities in China and just announced it will spend 10 billion euros constructing a new chemical production complex in China that will even rival the size of its German headquarters. Throughout Germany, executives are aware such investments run contrary to efforts by the United States to isolate China economically. However, after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which by the way has become very apparent who is behind the attack, wink wink, the Germans have seen their entire economic model evaporate. For years, Germany made immense profits by producing high-quality products using cheap Russian gas. But that business model was destroyed when 500 kilograms of explosives made its way to the bottom of the ocean floor and blew up the Russian gas lines that Germany and all of Europe so desperately needed. As a result, European executives realized one solution from the energy nightmare is generating more revenue from the world's largest consumer market, China. BASF's chief executive, Martin Brudermüller, said earnings from China allowed the company to effectively offset losses from Europe's high energy costs. He states, "Without the business in China, the necessary restructuring here would not be so possible. Name me just one investment in Europe where we could make money. Can you believe that? BASF, one of Germany's largest companies, just said that because of the ongoing energy crisis in Europe, there isn't a single alternative investment in Europe that would be financially profitable. Now you can understand why these German companies are moving closer to China. German automakers are in the same position. With high energy and labor cost, auto companies depend on revenue from China to help underwrite operations in Europe. If these European companies were to blindly follow the US into conflict with China, it would literally lead to bankruptcy and devastation of the entire European continent. But this leads us to a bigger story, because we know the war in Ukraine is not coming to an end anytime soon. The US government has made it clear that ceasefire is not an option, and the US is willing to arm Ukraine and fight Russia for as long as possible, which quite frankly will be a disaster for Europe in the long term. So just how bad is the energy crisis in Europe? Well, according to Bloomberg, it has already cost the EU $1 trillion, and relief on global gas markets isn't expected until 2026. What makes matters worse, on April 15th, Germany officially shut down its final nuclear power plants, which is only going to accelerate the European energy crisis further. Germany first announced plans to phase out nuclear power in 2011, but after Europe sanctioned Russian gas, many hoped that Germany would keep their reactors running to produce clean, low-cost energy for the continent. However, Germany stuck with its plan, shut down its nuclear energy, and is now scrambling to produce enough electricity. Germany had no other option last year but to revert to coal. In 2022, coal accounted for 33% of electricity production in Germany, a 30% increase from the previous year. Europe is facing an absolute crisis, and trading with China is not going to be enough. Europe must find an energy solution. But with every crisis, there is an opportunity. So let me tell you about today's sponsor, which is tied directly to the natural gas needs of Europe. And if you're an investor, you need to pay attention to what I'm about to show you, because the company I want to tell you about, MCF Energy, is the first natural gas company to go public after Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Right now, their stock is trading at 32 cents a share, but in my opinion, it has the potential to go much higher in the future. Here is their ticker on your screen, MCFNF. And here are 3 reasons why MCF Energy is so compelling to me. Number 1, they're solving some of the world's biggest problems: Europe's energy crisis and dependency on Russian natural gas. Number 2, MCF Energy wants to become the dominant natural gas company in Europe, and there are no other companies. There haven't been for 40 years because Europe could access cheap natural gas from Russia. So this presents a major opportunity for MCF Energy. And number 3, Europe is currently buying expensive natural gas from the United States and Canada. They must freeze it, load it on ships, sail it across the ocean, and then unfreeze it. Right now, Europe is paying 3 to 4 times the amount they normally would, and this model is simply unsustainable. Something has to change. MCF Energy is the only company currently exploring for natural gas in Western Europe. Just think about that for a second. As I've outlined in today's video, the energy crisis in Europe isn't going away, and in fact, it's going to get much worse in the coming months. When war broke out in Europe, MCF Energy jumped into action and started studying the natural gas spots in Europe and designated about 20 specific drilling sites, and then narrowed that down to the 2 best spots. The European Union recently changed the designation of natural gas to a green energy, and the EU is now encouraging companies to go out there and find natural gas in Europe. MCF Energy has the first mover's advantage, which in my opinion is going to be crucial to the long-term success of this company. They've already identified and bought 2 amazing drilling zones that are in the exploration phase. The first site they found is in Austria, and the second location is directly in Germany. Let me dive deeper into this. The company just raised $12 million and are about to buy more spots to start exploring and drilling. But another important factor in this company is the team behind this venture and their track record in the industry. General Wesley Clark was a US general for many years and has been a visionary energy executive and investment banker since leaving the military. General Clark is one of the most connected Americans in Europe and can open doors and get things done. He was the director of Bankers Petroleum, which grew oil production in Europe by over 2,000% and was valued at over $2 billion. In addition, other prominent energy investors like Ford Nicholson has agreed to join MCF Energy as a major shareholder and advisor. Mr. Nicholson was the co-founder of Nations Energy, acquired by CITIC for $1.9 billion in 2006, and the deputy chairman of Inter Oil, which was acquired by ExxonMobil for $2.5 billion in 2016. Guys, this is literally what these people do. They build companies, increase shareholder value, wait until these companies are acquired by larger energy companies, and then rinse and repeat. Once again, I really want to drive this point home. We are now more than 1 year into this conflict in Ukraine, and there is simply no end in sight. Europe has no other option but to reset its energy policy, and the entire continent has to figure out what to do now that Russian pipelines no longer supply it with natural gas. So please conduct your own due diligence on MCF Energy. As a geopolitical YouTuber, I'm constantly analyzing reports and data from around the world, and MCF Energy certainly piqued my interest, as they are the first mover to start exploring natural gas in Europe. So once again, take some time, conduct your own research, and to help you with that, I'm going to put some links down in the description below, and also a link to their stock ticker. Thank you everybody for your continued support, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.